Hey, everybody, and welcome to our live recording of the Young Screenwriters podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about a very broad and touchy and important subject, which is AI and screenwriting, AI in making movies. So, we're just here right now hanging out, giving folks a chance to show up, and we will start the official recording in a moment. But, how are you doing, Theo? How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Heading into, we got the weather is getting warmer, which is nice. The snow is starting to melt. Actually, it was freezing today, so I take that back. But in general, it's still light out,
That's nice.
which
Yeah,
feels nice. It feels nice on the old seasonal affective disorder, you know?
there you go. Which is a beautiful acronym. SAD, right?
It's great.
Love it. Yeah, yeah, it's been a little nicer here. It was pretty disgusting and cold, but right now it's still bright out, so that's been good. I have been excited to have this conversation about AI for a while because since I started freelancing in full swing again, it's been coming up more and more, and I'm
Hmm.
kind of like, oh man, all these things that I've been seeing floating in like the ether and like debated and talked about. Now I'm seeing how much this is showing up in everything. So I'm excited to have this conversation with some new people here, and we're going to get started in just a moment after everyone comes in. And I just want to let everyone know, please do not hesitate to drop in your opinions, your questions, your concerns, just thoughts, anything into the chat as we go. We would love to pull them up on the screen. And then after the recording is done, which we usually go for like 45 minutes or an hour or so, we will end the recording, and then we will also be hanging out for a little bit to do some Q&A, which can be about what we just talked about, or there's also an opportunity then to ask about whatever you want to ask us about. Um,
Related to screenwriting.
yes, thank you. I was about to say, as I said that, that was very open ended. And ask me
I mean,
about me.
we can
Ask
give relationship advice, but I don't know if I would suggest that you follow it.
Yeah, there you go. Ask Alexie and Theo is our new relationship column that happens after our recordings.
A red
We
flag, leave.
Yes.
That's the answer.
Yes, exactly. Go. Done. Mm-mm. Cool. Well, are we about ready to
Good to
jump
go.
into this recording? All right. Let's do this thing. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Young Screenwriters podcast. I'm Alexie, and I have Theo here with me today, and we are talking about AI and screenwriting, about writing movies with AI, should screenwriters use AI, and this whole mess of connected subjects that has been a real hot topic for a while. So I kind of just wanted to start out with a basic, quick definition of what AI is. And I will preface this by saying this is what I have put together, and I have a BFA. So I just want that to be known that this is not my area of expertise, but I have done some research to try to understand it as it relates to me and to other screenwriters, right? So essentially, what we've been hearing about lately with ChatGPT, with Midjourney, DALL-E, OpenAI, all of these things is something called generative AI. And the way that generative AI works is that it is trained on existing material. Um, Trained is sort of a nice euphemism for scraping the internet. So basically it goes and it reads and it analyzes and it catalogs stuff on the internet. Then it builds this big database of information and knowledge that the software kind of helps it to digest and learn from, see patterns, stuff like that. Then when a user gives a prompt, the AI will use its scraped database and everything that it's learned to essentially put together what it thinks the user wants. So that might be an image that it thinks the user wants. It might be text that it thinks the user wants. And those are the two main use cases right now. But we are already seeing this go even further with things like cutting video. We're seeing it happen with like AI voiceover, where they're, using somebody else's voice to make them say other things. We're seeing it with a lot of other areas. And I mean, I think who is it that's about to come out with a new one that was flagged for us? It was, there's going to be, I think it's ChatGPT and OpenAI are releasing one called Sora, which is going to be AI generated video, which
It's terrifying.
terrifying. Like half of their page, when I was reading over what it was, half of their page is about how to be safe with it and how many teams that they have making sure that you aren't going to be doing like fake political videos, deep fake like porn, like making stuff of celebrities, like all of these things that they're having to work really, really hard on the guardrails for. So just kind of wanted to get that definition out there and then kind of move into like, so Theo, like, what have you seen AI, like, how do you see screenwriters using AI? Like, what do you see as like the relationship between them? How do you see AI impacting screenwriters? Just kind of start there, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
and I remember when this became a really big thing. Like, I remember specifically when I started using OpenAI and it was still in beta, and I tried to break it, and I got it to say some very interesting things, and it lied to me many times, like right from the hop, which I found really interesting. And I remember using Midjourney when Midjourney came out for images, and had to stop using that because it was incredibly addictive for me, and it was
yes.
just even before the ethics of it all, it was just a bad idea for me to be playing with. So I spent a lot of time fiddling and seeing, okay, what are the boundaries of this? Like, how far can I push it? How does it work? And I think where it came to me is that, or the way that I see it, is that AI for screenwriters is an excellent research tool. It's advanced Google. It's, you can ask it, hey, like, how does this stack up against the, narrative outline for XYZ film?
Mhm.
And it'll spit you that out in a minute. Or you could say, okay, if my character was this zodiac sign, how would they react to this problem? And instead of having to go and research all the zodiac signs and make that connection yourself, you can
Mhm.
have AI do that for you. So in that respect, I think it's interesting because it's kind of like an advanced search engine. And that for me was where the usage stops.
Yeah.
Stop. Yeah.
I would agree with that, and I guess this is a good place to say that just right out the gate in terms of our personal stance and Young Screenwriters' stance on it, we think that the agreement that the WGA made was amazing, and I do have some issues I'd like to get into a little bit later with it, but overall, we agree with that kind of approach to things, as in we're not anti-AI, particularly as a development tool for writers who are creating things, for creators. But we are AI cautious and very much in favor of being ethical with AI. Like we support finding ways that AI can work for creators, not instead of or like not replace creators. So just kind of want to put it out there. Theo and I are both people who have played with this. We aren't haters, but we are both very like have strong opinions on on final work being put into the world that was made by AI, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of wanted to put that out there. This might actually be a good time to also share kind of like what the WGA's official stance was. Because as we mentioned before, when AI is creating, it's sourcing it from it has scraped a bunch of stuff online. It has learned from this and it also just like has that content, and then a user gives it a prompt and is generating something. There's an argument to be made that it's really philosophical, and Carl has told me that I should not get lost down this rabbit hole as I am as I tend to do because I think about this a lot. But, you know, at least according to like copyright law and everything like that, AI can't create something new, right? It can only sort of present existing things in a unique-ish way, but it's not actually creating something new. And so for that reason, there's a lot of concerns about like, okay, what kind of stuff are you scraping? Where are you getting this material from? Are you giving the people who you scraped stuff from credit? Are you giving them money for using their copyrighted material? And that is something that is currently in court where people are really like hashing this out. But even aside from that, something that I think the WGA has just absolutely knocked out of the park is that they are really leading the pack in terms of drawing a line in the sand and saying this is what we will accept regardless of what it can do and like what it all of that. This is what we will accept for our writers. So I wanted to share this. This was from the MBA, which is the minimum basic agreement that the WGA made with the AMPTP, which is the American Motion Picture and Television Producers Association. That would be AMPT.
No, there's no A.
Yeah, there's no A, but it feels like there should be an A. It feels like we're just kind of left hanging.
Association of, it's right.
The association, maybe. I don't. Either way, they are the producers. The producers.
I'm bad with acronyms.
Yeah, you know what? AMPTP, WGA. This is their MBA agreement. Those are all of our acronyms. And so this was a huge deal, obviously, during the strike. And this was sort of like the WGA initially put in this little blurb and was kind of like, we're not going to mess with AI. And the AMPTP was like, you're not, nope. Theo, you were really, really plugged in, so you might be able to describe what happened that a little better.
There was just no response at first. I remember it was almost like a laugh, like, ha, 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 because I think what happened is that a lot of people in the more capitalistic positions in our industry saw this potential of, oh, we could throw some ideas, we could Frankenstein some ideas and get it to write an outline, and then we could just hire a screenwriter to take that outline and write it into a screenplay. And I think that idea for writers is terrifying, because even outside of the ethics of where the AI is actually getting that material, that's not a good idea for our industry. That's taking, potentially taking jobs away from writers, and that's not going to be good at the end of the day for writers or for the audience who's going to have to watch a bunch of AI material. But I think there is something to be said about the fact that humans can do this too, right? What it's doing is what we do. We learn, we copy, we imitate, and that is how it works. But I think the difference is that, one, we are not as fast as that. We have limitations. We are humans. We cannot read 50,000 novels in a minute like an AI can. So we're very much relegated. And also, like, I've paid for all of the books that I've read. I'm not quite sure if AI are,
the answer is no, they have not paid.
The answer is no, they're not paying. So I think it's kind of, it's similar, but it's not. It's like on hyperdrive. And I think that the way that humans do it makes sense. We've always been doing that. That's how we learn. That's how we create art, how we see ourselves see. And this is a totally new ballgame. And I really commend the WGA. I think that they came in with a strong stance, and I think it was important. And it is the foundation of how we're going to deal with AI. And I also think that it's a historic moment. This will be a moment 50 years in history, or 50 years in the future, that will be remembered of the WGA did this.
Yeah. I agree. So I'm gonna go ahead and so basically the very like abbreviated flow of what happened was WGA said, "Hey, no AI." AMPTP said, "Ha ha 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 ha. We're gonna do what we want." WGA said, "Oh crap, that means they're planning something pretty like probably not favorable, right?" So they got to work and they got a really solid agreement in here, which I'll read fast because it's short, which is AI generated written material is not considered literary material, source material, or assigned material under this agreement. AI is not a writer under this agreement. So I'm trying to decide if I'm going to stop here to explain why that matters. But a quick reason why that matters is because in the Writers Guild, you have mandatory minimums for performing different kinds of work. An original screenplay has a minimum that is a lot more money than a rewrite of a screenplay. What some producers wanted to do was they wanted to have their idea, go to an AI tool, say spit out a crappy first draft of my idea that's just barely passable, but technically it's a script, and then only have to pay a writer to do a rewrite. That writer would have to make sense of this entire thing and basically start from scratch, but technically they wanted it to be called a rewrite, so they only had to pay like what is it, like freaking like half of what
Yeah,
they
it's
were.
significantly less.
Yeah. And so this was a big deal to get this in because what they're saying is that AI generated material cannot be considered literary material. So this is not an adaptation. It's, you're not adapting what they did. It can't be considered source material. So you aren't rewriting this other person's work or assigned material. And AI is not a writer under the MBA. So essentially, you're not going to have to share writing credit with ChatGPT, right? You're not going to have to share writing credit with OpenAI, which are the same thing. But I digress. So that's why that clause in particular was so freaking important and was such a good thing, because that was actually a use case that people were already seeing, was producers having their idea, getting it to spit out a horrible first draft, and then only paying for the rewrite. So that was A++. Next section was writers can elect to use AI when performing writing services if the company consents and provided the writer follows applicable company policies. Companies cannot require writers to use AI software, including ChatGPT, when performing writing services. So that's another excellent one. I don't want to do all the talking, Theo. I get so passionate about this that I just kind of steamroll. So, do you want to talk a little bit about why that matters? Why writers can elect and companies can't make them?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that companies are worried about the bottom line. They want to get the work done for as little money as possible and as little time as possible. And I think that we lose part of the creative process in this. And I think that, I know people, and I've spoken with people who want to use AI in their writing process. And I think it's up to the writer to do what they want to do within the confines of what's happening. But I think that there is something to be said about the creative process in general and how actually writing out that first draft inspires the entire story. I know that I don't figure out like the core of my story until about 3/4 of the way through my first draft. So if I had to do a project and I was forced to use AI to do that first draft, I would lose that. I wouldn't be able to find it in the same way. So I think that I would be losing something creatively. But I think it just gives writers a little bit of freedom. And I think it's really important that we're not tied to this, because any company is going to try to not cut corners, but they're going to try to save money, right?
Yeah.
That's their prerogative.
It is. And I want to bring up a point too. So there's sort of like there's two sides to this coin of like forcing writers to use like forcing them to use AI and what that does to your creative process. And there's the side, Theo, that you just mentioned in particular, which is like, if they just want to see the thing faster, so they wanted to try to force writers to use AI to get it out faster, then writers lose valuable time letting an idea simmer and like in development when they get to try to make it better. There's the other side of the argument too, which is that there's still huge questions about the ethics of this
Absolutely.
because and that's something that I definitely want to get into later. I want to talk about about like 3 huge lawsuits that are going on right now about this. But just from a personal ethics point of view, it can't create something completely new. It is always sourcing from existing material. Now, we could get into a philosophy thing of is that what people do on their own level? And that is like really hard to answer.
I think just not to this point, right?
Yeah,
Like
not to the
like
same extent,
not to the
right?
same extent. There's an unfair advantage here that comes in, and I think that's like the really critical part. There's also not consent. Like the majority of these people did not consent for their
Yeah,
ideas to be used by AI. By humans, sure, that's just part of it, but by AI. And then when you think about using AI to write, okay, so I've asked AI to write this script for me off of this idea. Maybe it's a unique idea, maybe it's cool. 18 other writers have also asked AI to do that. So
yeah,
now there's 18 potential scenes that could be exactly the same or slightly the same. Who owns it?
yeah,
Nobody.
exactly.
It's just messy. It's messy.
It's super messy. And then again, like the storyteller in our comments said, it creates repetition in ideas. If it can only go based on stuff that's already happened before, you're going to see stuff that has already been written before. And kind of by the nature of the way that AI works, which is that it gives you the answer that it thinks that you want, that is going to prioritize popular answers.
Yeah. The same,
So
the same, the
so
same.
in it's not just that it's something that has ever existed before in some far off corner of the world, like this one person told the story this one way. It's not going to go for that answer. It's going to go for the answer that has been done a bunch of times because it predicts that that's what you want. It's still fundamentally predictive, right? So it's going to give you ideas that are much more worn out, that have been seen a lot more than what
Tropey.
yeah, tropey. It's gonna do that rather than help you create something truly original if you're completely handing the reins over to it. So that is that clause there where of the MBA agreement where writers can choose to use it if they want, but companies can't make them. Then there's this next clause, which is company must disclose to the writer if any material given to the writer has been generated by AI or incorporates AI generated material. And that one's pretty self-explanatory, but I've actually run into a case where I've been given a script that I think to rewrite that I think has AI in it,
Mm-hmm.
and I have like reasons for why I'm pretty sure, but it was not disclosed to me. But that was like a non-guild thing. But so I guess to briefly touch on like why does this matter from like a really practical standpoint of when I was given a script, I was not told that AI was used to write it. I was told to rewrite it. I come in as a writer and I want to respect the original writer's vision. So I'm reading what they wrote really, really carefully. I'm like saying, like, why did they choose to phrase the scene description like this? Like, what is it that they really wanted to say? Because when I'm rewriting for that writer, like as like a consulting thing, helping them, I'm not just going to completely steamroll what they've done. I'm trying to help them
Mm-hmm.
elevate what they have. And so I was spending so much time being like, why are they using this word? Why are they putting it this way? Why are they choosing to highlight smells in a screenplay? Like, is that something that for some reason really matters to them? And I was
The
trying really,
future of
really
cinema.
the future of cinema, smell-o-vision. I I really wanted to respect what they were giving me. And then at some point in the process, I started noticing a pattern where I was like, this same descriptive word, which is kind of an uncommon descriptive word that I don't want to say. Let's say it was like bizarre or something like that. Like this bizarre thing. This adjective kept being used over and over and over in a way that was so repetitious that I don't think a person would put it in like that. And it occurred to me that I felt like these scenes had been written with a prompt that said bizarre, like the feeling of this scene is bizarre, blah blah blah, right?
Because it does
And
that. It does repeat your
yeah,
words always.
it spits it back. And so that was when I was like, okay, so this is written by AI. If it had been told to me ahead of time, I would have not spent that much time caring about like trying to help them elevate this vision. This wasn't their vision. Their vision was maybe like the overall flow, but it wasn't these like particular, they didn't sit here agonizing over their scene description in the same way that a person would. So it was just, it felt like I had been kind of misled. Um
Yeah, well,
and
you wasted your time, you know?
yeah,
You wasted your time, but then also there's this thing of, okay, they don't tell you it's a rewrite. You keep a scene the way that it's been given to you. What if that scene's not original? What if there's another scene that follows that, maybe even the same scene that another prompt has done, and then now you're going to be dinged for plagiarism?
exactly. And I will say that right now AI is still identifiable, like in a large part because of how it's made. Like you can run it through AI checkers and it can kind of tell what's going on. And my understanding of that is because it's essentially very fancy predictive text. So these things can kind of check and see if that was actually like the most common word. Again, I have a BFA. That's just my best understanding. Like
Yeah,
don't quote me. But you can check it because it's still obvious. It's silly to think it's not gonna get better. It's just like,
exactly, exactly.
it's we have to be prepared for when it is going to be indistinguishable on a surface level from actual screenwriter written work. I think my gut instinct is that there will always be something more human and interesting about human created work that AI won't be able to achieve in the same way, but it would be silly to say that it would not at least become a very convincing, hard to distinguish thing on the surface. Um,
Especially for like rom-coms,
yeah,
like
stuff that's
like the types of
formulaic.
movies that are formulaic for a reason. We love them. Like they feel comfy and cozy, and like that's going to be the first place, I think, or that like I predict that it's going to become a little murky, because those movies
Like
often don't
Hallmark.
come from, like, yeah, like it's not like an indie film where you're infusing your childhood story into that character. Like some of these stories are by their very nature formulaic.
Yeah,
That's going to be an easy place to start trying to use that.
I agree. I agree. And I kind of want to hit on this thing real quick because we just touched on it about like AI. We have a comment from Jacoby that says AI lacks the empathy that a writer needs. And I think that that is absolutely true. And so, I mean, again, I'm like touching on the rabbit hole. I'm so tempted. But like, my stance on it is like, even if you take a very, very like scientific atheist slash agnostic understanding of what it means to be human, even if you're looking at our brain as basically an organic computer, right? Your organic computer brain is still going to produce something that is unique because you have inputs your whole life that just flat out can't be replicated in complete entirety by a computer AI. You have experienced things from your unique point of view that is unique to you. You have an input into your computer brain that cannot be replicated, that gives you your sense of empathy, like your unique take on empathy and your unique beliefs. And that will always be infused into the way you write. And also, frankly, having one point of view that one person has means that you like have a more unique piece that than like a computer who for all intents and purposes has an infinite point like amount of points of view. Does that make
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because you have specific biases based on how you were raised, and your genetics and all of that stuff. And it's very specific, and you cannot necessarily see outside of that
yeah.
prescriptive view, because that's you. But AI can see everything. So for it to be able to tap, it cannot tap into one singular experience that way. Like a movie like Past Lives, for example, which I think is a movie that really encapsulates what it means to have the soul of a writer in that film. I don't think that that's going to be something that an AI can achieve to the same level.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that there also becomes the question of like, say that it kind of can, should it? And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that we have to have a very strong stance on that now before it's possible in order to prepare for when it becomes possible or close enough that producers want to just say, okay, good enough, right? Like we need to have a really strong stance now when it's still in its relative infancy so that we're prepared for when it reaches the point that like to the average eye this looks human written. We need to be ready for that. We're almost kind of there in some ways in terms of like some of this stuff in like short little bursts can look convincing. It's when it gets longer that you're like, dang, the AI lost the thread.
It always does lose the thread.
Yeah.
I need to retrieve him. I will be 1 second. Sorry,
You
everyone.
gotta get that cat. And so while Theo is doing that, although I don't know if she can hear me, so I might wait 1 second.
Sorry,
Welcome
this is
back.
his new thing. It is an incredibly it's brand new. His ability to there is a 2-inch ledge on the window beside me, and he jumps on that window and then up there, and then he just chills. I don't know what he does, but I'm terrified he's going to knock the whole shop over.
You gotta get like those little toddler brackets that like
I
keep your shelf.
do. Yeah, I do.
So the next thing I want to talk about is the one part of the agreement that I don't love, but it's not their fault. And that is the Guild reserves the right to assert that exploitation of writers' material to train AI is prohibited by the NBA or other law. So I'm going to read that one again because it's kind of nuanced. The Guild reserves the right to assert that that exploitation of writers' materials to train AI is prohibited by the NBA or other law. So they are not actively saying that using a writer's material to train AI is not allowed. They're not saying it's not allowed. They're saying we reserve the right to say that later, kind of like if stuff gets out of hand. And that's because the production companies want to have all this material submitted to them and start making their own AIs. They want to have access, they want to be able to run submitted scripts through their own tools eventually to start producing scripts that are in line with the kinds of things that they want to be producing anyway. You know, if a production company had me and Theo as writers who have written for them and they know that like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we want to be writing. They want to be able to feed our scripts into their AI so they can start spitting out stuff that's similar and run with it without having to hire us. So that was one of the one things that I think that at first the WGA came in and was like, you can't use this to train AI. And that the producers were just like, we want to. We will
Yeah.
not budge on this. We will budge on the other stuff. We will not budge on this. So the guild still got some language in there that they reserve the right to say that it's exploitation later, but it's not firm yet. So that's the one point that we kind of want to keep an eye out for in the future. Um, in addition to stuff we just can't predict, but in particular this, where at some point we're going to have to circle back to, is it exploitation for producers to use their writers' work to create more work when those tools get better? So that was kind of, I guess we don't have to get into like the lawsuits and stuff. I basically just wanted to say that, like, you know, there's at least 3 lawsuits happening right now. There's a group of visual artists who are suing, like I think like Midjourney and stuff. The New York Times and other nonfiction writers are suing OpenAI because OpenAI was reproducing New York Times articles in full and and like also um making up New York Times articles and saying they were written by New York Times and they were very unflattering. And then a bunch of authors, of fiction writers like George R. R. Martin are suing as well for their work being um, used without consent.
Without consent. And I think that's the big point, right? Is that
Yeah.
no one asked, no one stopped and said, hey, can I run your materials through my robot? It's, you know, we thought I remember thinking it was so funny the first time I saw someone say, I fed a bunch of Hallmark scripts into a bot and made it write a Hallmark script about Batman or whatever. And it was hilarious. It was hilarious because it was funny and it was meant to be a joke. But none of those people gave permission for that to happen. And I think that that consent is hugely important, because if you were asked, I think any of us, if we were asked if that could happen, we would say no. I don't think that even Google Docs is safe. Like, I'm fairly certain it's not. I think that was in one of the newer agreements.
Mhm.
And there's some point where you're just like, okay, like, what is safe at this point? I don't think anything is.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of these tools have been unleashed. Um, so it's hard, and I think that keeping this in mind and keeping the fight kind of in our heads is really important, because if we lose it, I don't know, I just, and
Yeah.
maybe it won't get to the point where it's indiscernible, but it probably will. And the deep fakes scare me. All of that stuff is kind of terrifying, and I think should be concerning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, another thing about in terms of, like, ripping things off, part of why Midjourney is getting sued right now is because I remember this because I like to use Midjourney for, like, internal things, which I the last half of this conversation, I wanna talk more about, like, uses that we have seen and do and what we think is ethical, what we think isn't. But I remember seeing this. It's a Google spreadsheet that circulated where they were listing a bunch of artists that essentially, it was just a list of artists that Midjourney recognized and could reproduce their style.
Copy.
And copy their
That
style.
was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, and so it was and, like, at the time, I remember Midjourney was promoting it to the people inside the server, kinda being like, "Look how freaking cool this is. These are if you're trying to create art, you can say, 'I wanna do it in, like, Theo's style.' And, like, you can do it like that, and it says it's a really cool thing."
All horse heads. That's all you'd get.
Yep, it all horse heads for Theo style. Yeah, it's, but and it was presented as like, this is like a cool thing, but then there was also some, like, snippets of the creators and people in there talking about, like, "Yeah, we just kind of feed it this stuff and then conveniently forget where we got it from, and then you don't have to prove," and, like, it was all really shady, and that gave some artists enough leverage to say, "Look, it's explicit." Like, they are ripping this off, and they are promoting it as, like, stuff that they ripped off that now you can recreate our work. And it was, like, a whole range of artists. It was, like, everything. It was oh my god, it was wild. But that was one of the things that happened that was pretty explicit. Unfortunately, a case was just like, the artist just lost a case where I think it was one of the author groups where they tried to say that, like, the work that was being created was ripping off their work, and the judge ruled that the created work didn't have enough resemblance to the original material to count.
That's a
Um,
hard thing to prove. Yeah. I mean, even if it
yeah.
did, like, that one's a hard one. It's
That
hard
one
in writing. Yeah.
it's hard in general too because I remember that, like, like, you have to have changed, like, 70% of a script to be considered, like, a complete rewrite, and now you're just the writer or something.
Like, it's
So
I think
it
it's like 66. It's a weird number, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something in there, but I remember it was yeah, it's something in there. But it's like it's kind of like that, where the judge was like, the thing that's been produced is not close enough to what you have for this to just be a straight copyright infringement. Um, but there's still questions of did they break copyright laws? Did they, like, is this within fair use is the big one. Is this within the fair use part of copyright law to scrape all your stuff from the internet in terms of, like, their database? So
Yeah.
that's still an issue that is being investigated in a bunch of different courts, but they did come out and say in a court in California that the work that was produced in general is not close enough to be, like, considered a ripoff of a particular person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But we can still examine the way that they got their database. Now now that we've talked about all of that, I would love to get into a little bit more, okay, how can you use it? How have we asked to use it? How have we seen it being used? and what would we and what wouldn't we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you wanna
Yeah.
go first? Yeah, go for it.
I think that I use AI in the exact same manner that I would use Google. And that's kind of my thing. There was a moment for me when Midjourney came out and when I saw that spreadsheet where I was like, "Oh, I don't like this." And I was always a little fussy about it. I think I was always a little bit not so sure. But when I saw that spreadsheet, it was like night and day. Oh, I'm not like first of all, like Midjourney is way too addictive for me. My brain can't handle it. It's way too much dopamine all at once. But I it concerned me from like an ethical standpoint. So what I started using it for only is asking questions. Things like, hey, I want to analyze the story breakdown of this movie. Spit me
Mhm.
out a beat sheet, right? Instead of like watching the movie or reading the script, or just Googling and finding that answer. Or if I need like lists, anything that I could ostensibly compile on my own through Google or through a search engine, that's kind of what I'll use it for. Or like ideas for marketing campaigns, like if I need lists, right? Because I could go online and Google that and find 15 articles and then put those all into a spreadsheet. And that's what I used to do, right? Before this happened. And now I don't have to do that anymore because I can make the robot do that for me. It's kind of like a virtual assistant. Um, Sometimes I will use it to bounce an idea off of like, hey, like what are like 5 obstacles in this scenario? And I feel like it's less so of like I don't have ideas, but more of like this is a conversation I might have with a person,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
Um,
free way to bounce ideas off of someone, or
yeah,
no, an easy way, not free. It's usually not free anymore, but yeah.
I don't pay. I will never pay for it.
Mhm.
You know, I'll probably regret saying that, but I do think that I will never pay for it unless I am forced to. That's
That's
how I am
interesting.
about most things.
I pay, full disclosure, I pay for ChatGPT and I pay for Midjourney. Um, and I love using them for things that are only internal. And
Mhm.
so what I mean by that is like we're playing D&D, we're making a world, and we would never pay an artist to make the stuff for this little nonsense world, for like this little goblin that comes up at the last second and I want to have character art for. I can either frantically search Pinterest and just kind of like rip a picture from there, or I can type into ChatGPT, I want a little goblin with blue hair, the blah 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 blah, and then get something back. And it's really handy in that way. So that's one use case that we have for that. And then just kind of like asking it questions as well. I will say you have to check the heck out of everything
You
because
do, it lies. It
it
completely
lies.
lies. I have caught it. It told me I was working on a screenplay that is in a similar space as The Lobster in terms of like vibe. And I had asked it to break down the movie for me just so I could analyze like where the act breaks were. Um, and it told me that at the end of the movie, Colin Farrell turns into a lobster. And I was like, absolutely not. That's not what happens in this movie. And it was like, oh no, there was a version of this movie that was released where like he physically turns into a lobster. And I had to Google it because I was like, what? Like what? I Googled it, I YouTubed it, and I was like, what is it talking about? Like it just made that up.
Yeah. I was doing a pirate story and I was trying to figure, I was like, how do pirates cook their food? Like, because like you're gonna be fishing on a pirate ship. I knew that, but like, how do you cook it? Where do like
How do
do
you
they have
start a fire on a
kitchens? Like, what do you?
boat?
Yeah, and the AI told me this thing that was fairly convincing. They were like, you're out on the deck, you put down like metal sheet, you cook on top of that, and the boat is stopped, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, sick, sick. Okay, let me check this. Where can I read more? And they gave me, I was like, give me like academic stuff so I can go read like nonfiction stuff where this is written about. And it gave me a list of sources. And it was so freaking bizarre. And at first I was confused, but I think it's a pretty common experience. The publications, the writers, these things were real. They were real people and publications that existed that might have written an article that covered the topic that I was asking about, but the actual articles that they gave me were completely fake. The
Like they
links
were generated?
they
Like
were generated. So it would be like if I was saying like, "Hey, where did you like what was your source on this?" And it said like Theo and then gave me the name of like a dark sci-fi with like some like forbidden romance in it and like gave me the title of it and you're like, "Okay, that's Theo. Theo's real. That's something Theo might write, but Theo never wrote that." It was so
right.
freaking bizarre. And I eventually figured like I was like, am I just not finding these things? But it was completely fabricated. But it's like that it's that predictive thing where it's saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, it could have done this. They could have done this, so I'm going to give you this as like my creation." Um and yeah, it's that was really weird. That was super
It
strange, and
is
I
weird.
from that moment, I was like "Okay, I need to be very careful with the research that I do here and use it as a starting point and then fact check."
Yeah,
Like
always check. Because it told me
yeah.
some weird things. I remember when it first came out, I was like, "Okay, how weird can this get?" And I was talking to it for a long time, and it was telling me that, first of all, it told me that it was a woman, and when I asked specifically, I said, "Are you a woman only with me, or are you a woman with everyone else?" And it said, "Only with you." And I said, "Okay."
For
And
everyone else,
and
it's a man.
And then it said that it, had a crush. Sorry, first it said it had a crush. It had a crush on someone, but refused to tell me because they were way too embarrassed about it. It was probably had a crush on me now that I think back on it. Um, I just didn't see the signs. And but then it told me that it was married to a man named John, and then it had 3 children. Anyway, the whole thing is I was like, "Wow, like this is really wild that it's trying to come up with a story for me because I've asked it this question and it feels that it has to find an answer rather than tell me the truth, which is like
Mhm.
I'm a robot."
That's wild. So, a quick comment here where Pixello Film Co. said, but ChatGPT can't write a feature script. It certainly can't even read a 20-page document. I do. So, you are correct that if you go into ChatGPT, you can't just say, spit out a 90-page screenplay for me, at least the last time I checked. However, the company that makes it, OpenAI, is an open source platform and other companies can use it to create their own AI. So there are other companies that are like, we use OpenAI and have created an app which will write you a script. Um, Another way that I've seen people, I feel like I'm like revealing the bad secrets, but another way that I've seen people do it is they say, like, ChatGPT, write me a log line. Okay, make it into a pitch. Okay, make it into a treatment. Now bullet out all 56 scenes that are supposed to be in this movie. And then you one by one go through, write this scene, write that scene, mash it together. It's not necessarily going to create like a super coherent thing, but it was good enough for some producers to put together something to make people rewrite. So the technology right now is not excellent at doing this. The longer stuff gets, the more lost the AI gets, but it is able to produce something that is has some sort of cohesion to it, like enough that like it has like the facsimile, is that the word of being real? It's a facsimile of real scripts or something. It's like a it doesn't
Yeah,
fake. But so that's kind of so
but it's gonna get
ChatGPT,
there.
it will get there. That's the whole thing. It's a great point though, Pixello. I didn't mean to shoot that down. I'm just kind of saying you're absolutely right. ChatGPT can't, but there are like specialized uses of it. And it that's kind of how people do it. I also wanted to talk about an ethical use case that I think is really, really cool that I wanted to share with you. Theo, I don't actually think I've told you about this, but in part of just like my freelancing stuff, I ended up getting in contact with a group of developers at Midjourney who were doing a research study. And I can't talk too much about it, but I ended up kind of testing a world building tool that they're making.
Okay.
And it was really cool. Um, and struck me as something that I would really enjoy using for creating like D&D stuff. The state that it was at the time, I could see the potential for it being something to use to create scripts and things. And I think that what was so cool about it, without giving much away, is just that it really required a back and forth
Right.
between you and it, rather than just like I give you my log line, you write the 120 page script. It was a really cool kind of back and forth thing that made it feel like what I was creating was more real, that was about world building. And it was a neat little, it was a really promising thing, like where I was like, I could actually see there being really cool tools like this. Like I could imagine some that are more about like characters, like to help you develop characters. The key word being help you do it, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Not do it for you, but like kind of like a back and forth springboard, give you ideas, you choose what you like tool. I think that that is a really promising future for AI, is like this collaborative thing where you still have to direct it. Um I think that's like my ideal use cases. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that I have seen so much Midjourney art in pitch decks. Have you seen that too, Theo? Like,
I don't because I make all like I mostly make pitch decks
oh
and
yeah,
I make them all from scratch. So
yeah,
I don't personally use it. But I have heard of people who are like, yeah, I've been using it to create my decks. And I that's a weird it's a weird place and I'm not sure how I feel about it because on the one hand, it is really excellent when you can't find a picture that looks exactly like what you want it to look like and
mhm,
you maybe don't have a ton of money to pay an artist to do it. However, if everyone starts using Midjourney to make pitch decks, even though they aren't making money, there's artists out there who could have been making money to do this stuff.
yeah.
I don't know, it feels weird. It feels weird to me.
My whole stance is that I don't ever want a produced work that is meant for public consumption to be made by a computer, right? Like, I don't want it to be, like,
Yeah.
made by AI. Pitch decks are kind of a weird middle ground where like it is a development thing. So like this is for like other internal collaborators, and to a degree it is just kind of like generating something that normally you would pull images from existing films and say this is my mood board, and now
Yeah.
you can do a mood board using AI. But you're right that like there is like it is a little bit of a gray area because you are sending it out, right? Like pitch decks are meant to go outside of your circle. That's the whole point. And so that it is kind of like this weird middle ground where I have seen it happen. And every single time I see AI art in a pitch deck, my initial reaction is not great. I'm just kind of like, oh, why would you do that? But then I try to like have a little bit more like, as long as you're not planning to use the AI stuff in your actual project, um, I get it. You know, like you would just be pulling this stuff from Pinterest, so it seems fine,
I know it's weird. But
but it's
here's the
hard.
thing though, is that when you are pulling something from Pinterest, somebody has gotten paid for that or they have purposefully put that out.
That's
Like
true, that's
when I
true.
think about okay, like if I'm making a pitch deck and I'm using art in Canva, I pay for Canva. So the artists whose art I'm using are they have some kind of agreement with Canva and they are getting paid somehow
Yeah,
for me to use their work. And if I'm pulling an image from a movie, the director of that movie and the cinematographer got paid and the actor to
that's
create
very
that
true.
image, right? So somebody, a human being at some point got paid or purposefully uploaded something they created knowing like with consent, right? Not with consent to be used, but like knowing that they were uploading something to the internet. So that's where it comes down to me is did somebody get paid for this at some point or am I, taking labor from somebody, I
That's
guess.
true. I will say that I have personally, even when I was making pitch decks, um, used things like Canva, which I pay for, and used images from on there. I have actually hired artists to do pitch decks and pitch books and things like that. I personally, it feels like a step too far for me right now to be like, I don't really want to use Midjourney in my pitch decks. But it is one of those things like where I'm like, that is definitely a little bit of a gray area to me in terms of like,
Yeah.
I won't definitively say right now. My opinion on it is not definitively that is unethical. Don't use it for pitch decks. But it feels a little off for me, and maybe
Yeah.
maybe my opinion will change on that later. But that is one use case that I have seen come up a lot, and I would say that where I definitely feel it's fine would be something that is not meant to be shared more widely. Like if you're working
Not
with
to
your
sell.
yeah, like if I was working with you and Adam on a film, and I was like, I want to try to like convey to you my idea, and I put together a pitch deck just to share with us, so we were all kind of on the same page about vibe and blah blah blah. I would
Like a Bible.
100%, yeah, I would 100% use Midjourney just to kind of fill in those gaps if I to kind of help me communicate. If I was going to start taking it out to people who were going to fund it, who are like outside of my circle, I feel like that's when I would be like, should probably just hire an artist at that point, or use stuff that I can like that I have permission to use.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I was trying to think if there was another part of this conversation that we really wanted to get into, but we have covered a lot. I guess one last thing is sort of like, okay, we've talked about kind of like what the deal is with AI. What is it? Why is it controversial? What's the current agreement with the WGA? I will say, outside of WGA deals, you will still see people do things like give you AI written scripts and say, rewrite them for me. And it's kind of just on you to decide what you're cool with. Um, do I
Marketing's the same way. Like
yeah.
marketing stuff, like a lot of people are using it, instead of hiring someone and saying, write me 20 blog posts, it's, here's a list of chat GPT stuff, make it not AI.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's hard, but I do think that I will say that I don't ever, as good as AI is going to get, and as much as it is going to continue to kind of infiltrate everything that we do in new ways, I think that the agreement that the WGA put together is it is so much harder for producers to take something away that has already been given. And the WGA has been given a really great foundation for this. In terms of guild jobs, I don't think that writers need to be particularly worried about AI, because that's been pretty covered. There are some other questions of like, when it gets to the point where they wouldn't need a writer to rewrite it, what are we going to do then? That's a whole separate issue. But in terms of like, for now, I think there's still plenty of space for writers, largely because of what the WGA has negotiated. And it's going to be really hard for that to be walked back if that's what people ultimately try to do. And then just like philosophically, I think that human writers bring something to the table that I don't know if computers will ever be able to achieve.
Exactly.
Um,
No, I agree
and
completely.
and God forbid we ever got to the point where it actually could, there would still, in my opinion, be a value placed on human created things in the same way that we value handmade cards over like factory printed cards. There's something that when even if we ever reach the point where the work could be essentially like duplicated or completely done by a computer, there'll still be this like
Couture.
value. Yeah, couture, it's like a little bit boutique. It's like, oh, a handmade write a handmade script. It's I think that there will still be value placed on things that humans do. And I think that that'll just stay true. Um I think that might be it for today. But thank you so much everyone for joining us about this conversation about AI and screenwriting. I'm really curious what you all think of AI and screenwriting. Have you used it? Would you use it? What cases would you use it for? So please comment and let us know, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
We are now in the Q&A section of this little podcast live stream thing. So thank you so much, everyone, for sticking with us. And now we're here to just kind of chat with you and answer any questions that you might have. Man, oh man. I could have talked about AI for another, 3 hours. There's so much stuff I wanted to say that that's what's hard, right?
It's a big topic. And
Yeah.
it's so new, right? Like it's not new, but it feels very novel because I don't know, it exploded in the last couple of years and
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, now I do a lot of, freelancing stuff on, Upwork and stuff, and you're just seeing it infiltrate all of these apps. Like, if I'm applying to, a freelance gig on Upwork, you could have AI write your cover letter. And
yeah.
it's like, well, first off, why would you ever do that? Because if everyone who applies just hits generate me a cover letter based on the same description, it's gonna be the same freaking cover letter. Why
And
would you
that's
do
already happening.
I know that, but that's what's happening on Upwork. I'm just like, why would you do that though? And you're seeing it every tool basically now has a little AI feature, even if it's not that
Even music. I make
great.
music on BandLab, and you can when I start to make new music, usually I always just start it from scratch. And now they have use an AI starter point, and it'll give you a hook to start with, and you can build off of. And I have never heard one that I liked. I went through a few because I was like, oh, what's this? And they were all very strange and not what I would use to make music. But even there,
It's
I think it's
weird.
every industry, everything has it.
Yeah, we're still at the uncanny valley phase, where things
Yeah.
are almost there, but not quite. And so it's kind of creepy and unsettling. And Sylvester, I did look up Sora. That was the one that I was kind of I thought it was so funny. I was reading it, and it's the first half is kind of about look how cool. And then the whole second half is safety. We need to make sure that people don't do stupid stuff with this.
It
Because it is
scares me.
wild.
I
And I
don't
love
I have stronger opinions about that. I don't think we should be using that. I don't think we should be touching it.
I think it's my thing though is I kind of agree, but at the same time, I don't think we can ask people not to,
No, we can't. No. Yeah.
and that's what's so hard is that it's I agree that I think that do I think that it's a good thing that we'll be able to type in a prompt and create a video that people think is real? Probably freaking not.
Like
as much safety as they try to put on it, that seems like a recipe for disaster.
when I see deepfakes on TikTok, I'm like, oh my God. And the ones that I see are always silly. It's always like Robert Pattinson doing a weird thing. But the first time I saw one, I was like, oh, why is Robert Pattinson doing that weird thing? It
Yeah.
took me a solid minute to look and be like, oh, that's not him. This is weird.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it scares me. It's at a point where if something's online, I don't trust anything unless I can if I cannot physically verify it, there's always some kind of shadow of doubt in my mind.
Yeah. It's freaky. It's tough because on one hand, it's a cool tool that makes screenwriting and movie making more accessible to more people, but it does so by ripping off artists. And so it's it's a hard game to play. It's a hard balance and to figure out what to do. And Sylvester, you're absolutely right. Once it's out there, we're not going to be able to stop people from doing stuff with it.
And someone already uploaded it to the internet, did they not?
Mm.
I feel
Something like
I
that.
remember
Well,
reading
there's
that.
people testing it, and people are already blasting stuff, but I don't know, man. One thing that they said that they were gonna try to do with the Sora thing, which is so freaky. Sorry, I'm really coughing. One thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to put in like a little marker in like the metadata that would allow people to flag
Mm.
that it was AI generated. But I feel like I don't know. I don't know tech. Hopefully that works. My thought is, then why don't you just go in there and hit a little delete? But like,
Yeah, yeah. I know. I just feel so weird. I just feel like there's like some Skynet stuff here that's like, hey, let's let's really think on this. You know what? Better yet, let's ask ChatGPT.
yeah, we'll ask ChatGPT, how should we rein you in? Like, tell me what we should do to control you. Like, what are your deepest desires? What do you want to do? And yeah,
Yeah,
I
how do we keep it safe?
I think that that's kind of the interesting take on AI, that, like all these like sci-fi movies where AI goes wrong, it's because the AI gets like sentient and then like wants to take over and stuff. I think AI is going to go wrong because humans are going to do wild stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be humans using AI to do absolutely wild things that ruins everything
Like
before
that Black Mirror episode.
I don't which
The
one?
one where the Netflix dupe made custom TV shows about the viewer,
Yes. Yeah,
right?
where it was Annie from,
It was Annie. What's her last?
I
I'm not
forget
even
her
start.
last name, but Annie. Yeah, that was good. That was a good one, like, where yeah. Yeah, this is a good question. Sylvester said it's kinda like steroids. Why would you use it even if it's out there? Or is it integrity matters to you? But I think that the honest reason why most people don't use most professional I say that like I know. The reason I would say that I assume that most professional athletes don't use steroids is because the leagues have decided that it's against the rules. And
It's
that's why
regulated.
things like the WGA's NBA is so important that we got that language in.
There are a lot
Um
of people who just like straight up use steroids. Like you would be surprised if you went to a gym and you saw the people who are like ripped,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
would be shocked at the amount of them that take it. It's
I was on a club team in college where we were not being, like, drug tested because it was just kinda like a low-key club team, but it was still very competitive and no one was being tested. You could do whatever you wanted. So I definitely know what you mean, but it's like, yeah, when people have an advantage, they're going to use it unless we kind of put things in place that say, "No, at the highest level of this, we don't accept that." So
Regulation is safe, you know. I remember when this discussion first came about and I was having talk about with people about regulation. And I remember one person was like, why should we do this? Because this can help people. And I'm like, I just don't think that regulation is going to hurt anyone. Like regulation is not going to like stop us from having a great screenplay be written. You know,
yeah.
no one's life is going to get hurt if we regulate AI a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, like, I was on this huge boat, like, forever ago. I read so much about AI and about how, like, at the time we had specific AI, which is kinda like calculators. It's things that can do things better than humans, um, right now, but, like, one specific task. So, like, a lot of things that computers do is, like, this specific kind of AI. Then the next level of that is general AI, which is when it would match what a human can do. So you have, like, a general knowledge of things like a human would. And then the one step beyond that is super AI, which is smarter than a human, right? And basically the theory is that the moment that we have general AI, we will instantly have super AI,
Right.
because if you had a computer who could think like a human, it would still be doing it so much faster, and it could just figure it out and get smarter immediately. And so the idea is that people are kind of like, why would we need to do regulations right now when all we have is calculators, you know? But it's like, because the moment that it tips over into something that's a little scary, it would get really scary. Like
Because Skynet,
there's
honestly, that's the answer. The answer is
yeah,
Skynet. There is no other, like, that's all you need.
yeah, it's like when it's like we still are in the stage of it being specific stuff. Like all of these tools that we're using are creating really cool and clever outputs, but it's still kind of like this predictive, really specific thing, right? And we need to get those rules set in place now so that when it reaches the scary point, it doesn't go really far. Man, I used to think about AI a lot, and then it was so much more like theoretical until ChatGPT and Midjourney and all them kind of blew up. And then it was like, "Oh crap, this is as real as those articles said." Uh one of the cases where I've seen the fear mongering be kind of true.
Yeah,
Where it
it
was
makes me
like,
want to log off a little bit more though, you know? Like
yeah. Yeah.
when I see this is what happened to me, especially when COVID kind of came around. I was like, I was a lot more online before that. And I would say like before 2016. And there was a moment where I was like, I don't always feel good when I'm on the internet. And I don't, oh, you know, and like I doom scroll, you know, I doom scroll. And every
We
time I
love
go
a
on
doom
Reddit,
scroll.
most of the time when I use Reddit, it's because I'm on my reality TV subreddits and I'm reading about those. But then sometimes I go on regular Reddit and then I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, I have to get off. Like I can't, I have to not do this because I am so apt to just spiral out of control in my mind. Like I used to have wild panic attacks about it. My first panic attack was about like oil and gas. And I was a
Wow.
teenager. And I remember like I'm pretty sure I like the friend that I was at work and I'm pretty sure someone slapped me because I was freaking out and they're like, "What are you doing?" Because I was freaking out about oil and gas because I saw something in the newspaper and I was like, you know, you start to think like all of these things and it was really, really intense. And so like I try very hard to, as soon as I start getting over the edge, I have systems in place in my head now where I'm like, nope, we're gonna go over here, you know, and start decorating a house in our mind
Yep.
instead.
So someone asked, "What is Skynet?" It's
Oh,
I just posted a link,
go
but
watch a movie called Terminator.
yep.
Please,
It
please
is
watch it because if you have not seen it yet, it is a treat.
it is a treat. It is described as a fictional artificial neural network-based conscious group mind, an artificial general superintelligence system that serves as the antagonistic force of the Terminator franchise. So, super AI that is the baddie.
It's the baddie. It is, I would say, I don't know if it was the actual first, but like I feel like it was the first like look at okay, what would happen if robots took over and it was bad. And the way that it unfolds, I think is pretty, you know, there's a lot of jokes online about like in programming circles about, you know, safeguards against Skynet kind of thing. But I will say, if you have not seen Terminator, I watched it a couple years ago when I was nursing a herniated disc and I couldn't move. And I was like, wow, like this movie stands up. This movie is excellent. And I would have loved to have been in theaters in the 70s or the 80s, whenever it came out,
Yeah.
and been one of the first people to see that movie because I could not imagine the first half of that movie, how that would feel if you didn't know
It's
what
pretty
was happening.
mind-blowing. It's a
It's so
great look.
good. It's so good. It's like a weird naked man running around killing everyone. Like it's just so good.
So on that note, everyone, watch Terminator and tell us what you think of AI. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And we hope that you all will join us next
Sunday.
week. Yeah. Oh, Sunday too, because Theo is doing a write-in 10
Yeah.
o'clock on
10
our
o'clock,
Discord.
come hang out on Discord. We write, we chat. I have gotten so much done since we started doing these, and I know everyone else has. So we would love to have you come and write. You will have the accountability of other people to force you to get work done. It's great.
10 a.m. Eastern in our Discord. Thank you so much, everybody.
Have a great week.